Hello, everyone. How did week one go? Hopefully it went well. If it didn't, I'm sorry. I don't even know who to blame for this. Republicans, Democrats, your inability to use technology because kids just aren't good at that. I don't know. Maybe you just waited till the last minute. Maybe I don't know how to put stuff online. Could be any of these things, but I hope that you're well. I hope you're having a nice time with your family, or at least a time with your family. Remember, they're good to have around because some of them can cook, some of them can clean. The older ones probably pay for your stuff. The younger ones are kind of fun to be around and they're entertaining. The pets are probably pretty fun, so you're probably good. I live by myself, so I'm hanging out with the squirrels occasionally in the backyard, but not so much today because it's raining. So I figured I would talk to you from the kitchen table again so you can see the cereal. I haven't used any or bought any more because I don't really eat cereal. I make Chex Mix with it. And you can see like right back, oh, there, right there, Rice Krispie Squares from time to time. So, but you don't care about that. You only care about history. That's why I like you guys so much. So let's get to it. Okay. So chapter 23 is about the Cold War. This is the thing of people from my era. This is why we hate the dang Russians. They're terrible. They're evil, godless communists. You need to remember that. They're not just communists, they're evil, godless communists. That'll help you understand why this time period is so rough. If you're wondering, like, is she looking down at something? Yes, I'm looking down at the questions that I'm asking you for this week. So hopefully, I will give you some information that's helpful. Oh, and I forgot to show you, look, USA shirt. Okay. All right. So go team. You need a USA shirt if you're going to talk about this era because the United States is so far superior to the evil, godless communists of the Soviet Union that we can never forget this. It's why my generation really likes those Rocky movies, and whenever we have bad guys, they're always Russians. And Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoons, um, Russians are always bad. Russians, terrible. Okay. All right, so let's get down to it. Now, the first question, the discussion board question this week is how does the Cold War impact uh, the average daily life of people in the United States? Now, there's really no aspect of your life that isn't changed. If you're a government worker, you've got to take, oh, sorry, allergies. If you're a government worker, you've got to take an oath that says that you're going to be loyal, a loyalty oath to the government. You got to swear loyalty to the Constitution. We're going to add God to the Pledge of Allegiance and make sure that all the schools say the Pledge of Allegiance so it impacts the students. If you work in the entertainment industry, if you hang out with too many communists or did so in the 30s and 40s, it could cost you your job if you don't name names. Um, During this time period, guys like Norman Miller and some other folks will write about Puritans a whole bunch because they can't really write about Joseph McCarthy because then they'll get blacklisted and they won't have jobs. So there are very few aspects of American life that this doesn't impact. So honestly, the whole chapter really should help you with this. It impacts how we devise our military strategy, why we spend so much money on defense during this era. It also impacts the civil rights movement because I don't know, a couple different ways. In one way, we start to label the civil rights leaders as communists because they're pointing out that our government isn't what it should be. However, we're also pointing out that our government isn't what it should be because the four freedoms that we said we were fighting to make sure the entire world had weren't available to everyone within the United States. So it's going to encourage the civil rights movement, but then label some civil rights leaders at the same time. And it's going to impact our military direction, our foreign policy. We're going to create NATO. We're going to have people pick sides before there's a conflict, which could prevent a conflict or just create a new type of conflict. So, kind of depends on how you look at it. So, I really think answering the 4 questions for this chapter will really help you with the discussion board post as well, because it'll get you in line. Okay, so we'll look at question number 1. Question number 1. How did laws, policies, and events like the Truman Doctrine and Marshall Plan, Berlin Blockade and airlift, and creation of NATO, plus the Korean War, reveal legitimate concerns about the spread of communism and the rise of the Soviet Union and China? Okay, now, most of this chapter is going to be about how we overdid stuff, and we probably do. But the Soviet Union is not sweetness and light. That Joseph Stalin dude, he's bad. He's probably responsible for more deaths than Hitler, although I'm not trying to suggest to you that Hitler wasn't bad. Clearly he was. Oh, dang. Do you guys have phones in your house like that? That's ridiculous. I really need to get rid of that. Probably almost always a politician calling to take a survey, or that guy that wants you to extend your warranty on the car you don't really own. All right. Probably a communist calling because I'm talking badly about them. Okay, Truman Doctrine says, oh my gosh, there's a message. Truman Doctrine says, if your government is about to be infiltrated from outside by evil, godless communists, then we will send you money or troops or whatever you need. So all you have to do is tell us the communists are coming and we will come to your rescue. This is in large part due to some revolutions that were going on in Greece and Turkey right after World War II, where a legitimate Communist Party and then maybe not as legitimate outside agents who are probably Soviets were involved in trying to overthrow a legitimately elected government. So the British had been helping these folks. The British said, hey, we're broke. Will you guys do it? And we said, heck yeah, we have money. Let's go. Plus, communism, it's evil and godless. So we are trying to prevent European governments from being overthrown by communists. The Marshall Plan is kind of the money behind that and maybe more of a domestic policy. I'm sorry. It's still a foreign policy, but it's about fixing the economies of European nations. So the Marshall Plan, and this is government policy that was issued at a college graduation. So you never know what's going to happen at graduation. So this Secretary of State, John Marshall, gave a speech at the Harvard commencement graduation, and he said, hey, we are going to rebuild Western Europe. All they have to do is submit a plan and let us know what their government's going to be like. We just wanted to make sure that you had a multi-party election, so you can't just be communist, you see. So as long as you ask us for help and you submit a legitimate plan, we will fund you. And we spent like 17 billion, maybe even more, dollars during this time period, which was a very large amount of money. And what this leads to is a general economic revival in Western Europe. If you're wondering why we did this, because we're selfless and pure, we're the United States of America. We also didn't want those countries to become reliant upon the Soviet Union, like some of the countries that we'll call the Eastern Bloc did. So when the Soviets were coming through on the eastern side of Europe at the end of World War II, they were getting rid of the Nazis, but then they were adding them to the mix. So rather than creating free governments, you traded Hitler for Stalin. It's probably a slight trade up, but maybe not. I mean, it's tricky stuff. Oh, I touched my face. It's okay, I'm alone. All right. So Marshall Plan, Berlin blockade. Stalin said, you know, those Americans are weak and spineless and wimpy. So if we just block off some supplies from Berlin, and I know you read the book, so I don't want to tell you everything, but after World War II, they partitioned Germany into 4 parts, excuse me. So you had a part that was controlled by the Soviets, a part controlled by the French, a part controlled by the British, and a part controlled by the United States. After a while, the 3 allies who were not the Soviet Union decided to unify their part, and that became West Germany to people of my generation. East Germany was the Soviet-controlled sector. Berlin was the capital city, was within the Soviet-controlled sector, which was also divided into four parts, which the three more Western allies consolidated into West Berlin, and then the Soviets controlled East Berlin. People kept going back and forth, really just out, not back and forth, out of East Berlin to West Berlin so that they could have jobs and money and food and things like that because, Westerners are just cooler than Eastern European folks. That part of the city of Berlin was more prosperous. So the Soviets thought this looked bad, so they decided they would just cut off supplies to West Berlin, and then it would just become Berlin. And their thought was the United States is wimpy. They're not going to put up with this for very long. They'll just give in. They don't want another war, which is true. We were tired of war. And they're not going to send troops over to do this. Well, Harry Truman, who's kind of a stubborn dude because he's from the great state of Missouri, yes, the state I'm from. He said, you know what? We'll just drop supplies in. We'll use the same type of plane that we use to drop atomic bombs. No signal there at all. And we'll drop food in instead. So they dropped pallets of food and hundreds and thousands of tons of food. And then the Soviets said, you know what, that's cool. They'll do that for a while, but they will give up on this after a while. And then after about a year, we were still doing it. So then the Soviets said, you know what, just forget it. We're going to reopen the normal chains of transportation for supplies, that kind of thing. If you're wondering, also, this happened during an election year. 19 crud, 48. Why did I forget? 1948. Because they were hoping maybe to get a new guy in there to disrupt the fabric of US government. And if you're thinking this only happens when, I don't know, Trump runs for president, no, it's kind of a historical thing. Other countries try to mess with other countries during their election year. So this actually helps Truman get reelected, which is kind of interesting. So the airlift is us dropping the supplies in. The blockade is the Soviets trying to make sure we don't get supplies into Western Berlin. NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is an alliance that we create before a war breaks out. So this is our commitment to the idea of staying involved in international politics, not waiting until a world war breaks out. Because we are kind of 0 for 2 on this world war thing. I know, the t-shirt, but we stay out of stuff until it gets super desperate. The goal here is to make sure nothing super desperate happens. And that kind of, sort of, maybe, sort of, I don't know. You'll have to decide. It's your opinion if it works or not. We're also going to create the United Nations. Sorry. We're going to create the United Nations to try to prevent world conflicts or intervene in world conflicts before they become world wars. And you can also assess whether you think that was useful or not. So maybe we do all of these things because the Soviet Union and later on China are legitimate threats. Maybe we overreact. There's probably some of each, but I think anyone who tells you that communism during this time period was benign, that either means good or it was not harmful, is probably not paying close attention to Stalin and Mao, who caused the deaths of millions of people. But anybody who says that we were perfect during this time period, also probably not paying close attention, because you'll notice a few things that go wrong in this chapter. And if you don't notice them, one, you're not reading closely enough. And two, you'll get another chance next chapter to notice a few things that go wrong. All right. Part of the reason I like Harry Truman is question number 2, the To Secure These Rights survey pamphlet publication that he's involved in. One of the things that you will notice about Harry Truman, if you study him closely, which you won't because you're not from Missouri, is that he is really part of a political machine which controls politics in the large cities in Missouri, Kansas City and St. Louis. So part of the reason that he was picked to be FDR's last vice president was that they thought he was fairly conservative, that he would be attractive to the South because he's probably racist. That's kind of what they thought, because Missouri was a segregating state during that time period. So he's kind of got a Southern feel to him a little bit. Now, when he becomes president, one of the early things that he does is desegregate the military. Now, he does this after World War II, but it's one of the things he feels like he has a legitimate authority to do because, as commander in chief of the military, he feels like that's a move he can make that isn't going to disrupt the entire country, but will make a big statement. And the people who are involved in the military are going to follow orders because that's what people in the military do. That was a little disruptive or a lot disruptive, kind of depends on how you look at it. But it was accomplished fairly well and fairly easily compared to desegregating the rest of the country. Now, in this To Secure These Rights publication, what the Truman administration says is it's time to desegregate everything else. It's time. Now, he knows if he does that with an executive order where the president just makes a law, it's going to cause huge problems within the United States, riots and conflict, and maybe a modern version of the Civil War. So he's not really sure that's a great idea. But he's going to do what he can, and he's going to suggest to the rest of the country, to Congress, to other parts of the governing bodies within the United States that it's time to do this. You'll notice that the first group that really picks up on this is the Supreme Court, and we'll talk more about Brown versus Board of Education as we move through the 50s a little bit more. Excuse me. But within here, you've got several declarations of human rights. You got a little bit of baseball with Jackie Robinson, but you also have some oppression of people with differing views with the Hollywood 10. You've got the Dixiecrats who definitely have a very Southern view about how the Democrats should operate, and they're frustrated because Harry Truman has now made civil rights part of the Democrat Party platform, which it really hadn't been before. Remember, Democrats were the party of the KKK for a very long time in our history, still during this time period. So the rise of the Dixiecrats is really what historians would call a white backlash, but you can see it as like round two or three of the KKK. It's not exactly that, but it's pretty close to that. What else? Oh, McCarran-Walter Act, just reminding you that we have to be loyal to the United States and we have to investigate people that might be in communist league or something in league with the communists. So question 2 is really going to ask you to divide those things into two different camps and talk about how they're similar and how they're different. And what I'm really wanting you to do there is notice that within a country that's pushing for civil rights, we're also pushing back on civil rights at the same time. So it's kind of an interesting era because we're trying to figure out who we are and if we want to change or if we don't want to change. Okay. Question number 3 is just a reminder that there is a Korean War. It lasts from 1950 to 1953. Your presidents during that time period are Truman at the beginning of the war and, Eisenhower at the end of the war. Part of the reason Eisenhower gets elected is he makes a promise to go to Korea and end the war. For the first year, there's a lot of heavy fighting. After that first year, it's not quite a year, but probably 8 or 9 months, there's a stalemate around the 38th parallel. What you'll notice if you look at casualty numbers is that within this 3-year period, the casualty numbers are very similar to the 15-year period of the Vietnam conflict. So this is a really deadly civil war, kind of like trench warfare, but with modern warfare or modern material. So it's a very costly war for a lot of folks, especially Korean folks, because that's mostly who gets killed, and that's the country that we pair up as well. This is an anti-communist crusade, and even though we call the US-USSR conflict the Cold War because there's no official war, I think people in Korea and Vietnam might dispute that. So, what happens between the United States and the Soviet Union and China to a certain extent is that we fight conflicts on somebody else's home turf. So, what really leads to the end of this, besides Eisenhower going there and saying, I will, bring an end to this, is Stalin dies in 1953. And he had been the primary force behind funding this war. Once Stalin dies, the Communist Party and the Soviet Union says this is not worth the money. So they tell their friends in China, we appreciate all the folks you sent over, but you're not spending any money on this. So we're out. If you guys want to fund it, go ahead. Well, China is broke during that time period. So China says nope. And then you end up with a ceasefire. The Korean conflict, kind of interesting because we have a ceasefire but no treaty. So they're technically still at war and technically still waiting to reunify. I would not hold my breath on that one because we've been waiting since 1953. All right, final question. Defend the arrest, convictions, and sentence of Alger Hiss and Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. So Alger Hiss is going to have his reputation and career ruined. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg are going to be executed. They are handing over nuclear secrets when we are trying to keep nuclear technology from the evil, godless communist Soviet Union. What you would notice if you read a whole lot about that case is while they are culpable, they're probably not the most culpable. Probably people a little higher up the food chain are more capable. A guy named Klaus Fuchs, who is the physicist who really was in charge of the deal, and then David Greenglass, who is, oh God, was he a machinist, I think, who helped devise some of the techniques to create some nuclear stuff that other people had designed. But David Greenglass was Ethel Rosenberg's brother. So when the FBI got to him, CIA, oh my gosh, I got the wrong group. When the CIA got him, he turned in his sister, and then his sister and brother-in-law loved communism so much that they either didn't want to or didn't have anyone else to turn in, so they get executed. So it's kind of rough. Um, Talk about how these cases were similar and different. The Alger Hiss thing's really weird. I think I put in a video about the pumpkin papers where Whitaker Chambers, who's a double agent, um, became friends with Alger Hiss, or at least acquaintances, and then Alger Hiss said, I don't know this guy at all. And then Whitaker Chambers came up with pictures that said, here we are together, so you've got to be lying. And then Whitaker Chambers takes a whole group of reporters out to a pumpkin patch and then shows where he hid microfilm, which showed the two of them together. And then Alger Hiss gets convicted of perjury, but statute of limitations had run out, so he couldn't get convicted of worse stuff. But it's still bad for him. It makes him look bad. So, if you have any questions about any of these questions, because I've noticed we're already into the 20 minutes. Some of you are already shopping online. Some of you have started Instagramming. You're counting the boxes of cereal again. So it's clearly time for me to stop. If you will send me an email if you have any specific questions. I think I fixed all of the discussion board problems, which I appreciate you guys letting me know about. Part of the deal with the technology, I'm not good with technology. I'm a history teacher and I'm old. So what the heck? What do you want from me? I'm doing my best. But I want to make sure that it's accessible, that the amount of work that I'm giving you is reasonable. You'll get a survey about that at the end of the week. Also, I figured since, we're talking about communism today, I'd break out the hat. Look at this hat. Look how cool it is. Okay. There you go. If you ever need stuff like that, like this was after 4th of July is like 75% off because honestly, who in the world makes such things and sells them? It's crazy, honestly. Yeah, HEB and Leander, that's where I got it. All right. All right. Hope you guys are staying safe. Hope you're staying well. Hope you don't have allergies like me because every time you cough, the neighbors want to call 911 and say COVID-19. It's just allergies, I promise. Okay. Stay safe, stay well. Email me if you have questions and answer the survey questions at the end of the week, okay? All right. I know you miss me because what else are you doing right now? I miss seeing you guys as well and hope you're well. Be nice to, be nice to the pets, your little brothers and sisters. Take care of yourselves. Answer the questions to the best of your ability. Don't stress out over this, but also don't leave it to the last minute. Don't be a slacker, but, don't stress out about this because, what else are you going to do? Plus, those high school teachers, they're not making your stuff count yet. So mine's more important right now. I am more important than physics right now. Maybe in a week or so, you can put physics back on top. All right. Take care, and I will see you next week. Bye.